Hello gamers, I know it's been a while, but
I'm back! I'm back!
Zoltan the Gamer Man here, and these are my honest thoughts on Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Well actually, we Europeans like to call them kilometers. Now in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about the game's looks, its sounds, its story, but most importantly, whether it can live up to its spectacular predecessor and be a worthy launch title for the PlayStation 5. I've been lucky enough to snag a PS5 pre-order and play Miles Morales on Sony's new console, and let me tell you, it's a damn good piece of hardware. But you're not here to listen to me gush over the PlayStation 5, so let's get right into it. Spider-Man Miles Morales has absolutely astonishing graphics. Utilizing the full capabilities of the PS5 like ray tracing, 60 FPS, this game is a beautiful showcase of what PlayStation's next-gen hardware will allow the developers to create. Oh yeah, I think the PS5 and
We're gonna have a hell of a time.
But back to the game, there's no two ways about this. The game's fidelity mode with ray tracing enabled and the amped up graphics make the cityscape, the reflections of buildings, puddles, cars, the lenses on Miles' mask, any surface really that is reflective, they just look superb, as well as all the fabrics and all the surfaces, not to mention the much more natural looking lighting. Now, to play in this mode, you will need to make do with the 30 FPS frame rate cap, so keep that in mind. On the other hand, performance mode is no slouch itself. It tones down the graphics somewhat, but don't worry, the game still looks gorgeous. It also removes ray tracing altogether, but offers up a nice hot plate of 60 FPS. So if you want a smoother gameplay experience at the cost of souped up looks, performance mode is for you. But if you're a nut for beautiful graphics and jaw-dropping scenery and don't mind a dip in frame rate, in other words, if you're like me, then go all in for fidelity, baby. Little side note here, I've also been playing a bit of Spider-Man Remastered, which also features both of these modes, and wow! For me at least, the visual improvements will most definitely warrant a replay. And no, I do not mind Peter's new looks. I mean, of course, I really like the previous iteration, but really, what are you gonna do about this one?
Gonna cry?
It does take a bit of getting used to, but ultimately he's alright. Ooh, and let's not forget about the gorgeous particle and electricity effects you get when Miles gets all charged up and gives the baddies a double dose of... Seriously, I could go on all day about how beautiful Spider-Man Miles Morales looks. I mean, in my opinion, the metropolitan vistas of this game easily rival the beautiful scenes of nature found throughout Ghost of Tsushima. These games are two ends of the same spectrum, and both look absolutely gorgeous. But that's enough about the graphics. Let's take it over now to sound.
Oh, hey, sorry, happy holidays!
In my opinion, the sounds of Miles Morales are overall amazing. The city sounds as you web string through it are just as good as the previous game, the combat sounds are also great and immersive, a bit updated with new sounds added for the venom attacks, and everything is just great overall. But an especially pleasant surprise was the game's score. I mean, the music is just really awesome. The hip-hop beats being mixed with the original classical score is just...
Oh, yeah.
That was the first thing that, in my mind, really set this game apart from its predecessor. It made me feel like I am not in just a reskinned version of Marvel's Spider-Man, but in a game that, true to its label, is simply itself. And the voice actors are also great, with each and every one of them turning in exceptional performances. But I can't not say this. One performance stands above all, and let me just take a moment here and give some much deserved praise to Yuri Lowenthal for his hilarious and whimsical, yet at the same time wise and very profound performance. Even though he is only in the game for a little while at the beginning and then at the end, save for a few phone calls and challenges, he just steals the show each and every time. Especially in the beginning of the game when the two Spider-Man face off against the Rhino, and while you're fighting the goons with Miles, he's just in the back wrestling the rampant runaway. His quips just genuinely made me crack up. I mean, they were so funny. At one point, I really had to pause the game because I just couldn't concentrate on what I was doing. Much like to most of us, Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman when it comes to animation and video games. With his performance in 2018 Spider-Man and now Miles Morales, for me, Yuri Lowenthal is the voice of Spider-Man. And that sound all wrapped up in a nice sticky cocoon, now let's take it over to story. Spider-Man Miles Morales' story picks up 1 year after the events of Spider-Man. Miles is still adjusting to life as the new Spider-Man, trying to hold his own alongside the veteran that is Peter Parker. And he still isn't quite there yet, but he's doing his best trying to fill some, well, let's face it, big shoes. After his father's death, Miles moves with his mom to Harlem and to his grandmother's old place, and Genki, Miles' best friend and TechWiz sidekick, is staying with them over the winter holiday. At the beginning of the story, Peter has to go away with Mary Jane, his girlfriend, on a work trip to Simcaria, which leaves Miles the sole defender of New York City. Conveniently, this happens just when the Underground, a group of high-tech terrorists, show up and wreak havoc around the city. Now they're led by the Tinkerer, a mysterious figure going after Newform, a chemical owned by Roxxon, the other not-so-righteous party in Miles Morales' story. I mean, just look at this so-called plaza they have built right in the middle of Harlem. I mean, if that doesn't scream evil lair of malicious villain, I don't know what does. As one would expect, things get complicated, and it'll be up to Miles to set things right and defend the neighborhood. Now that, in my opinion, is a pretty well written and even better executed story, which, while admittedly being noticeably shorter than its predecessor, kept me glued to my controller each time I sat down to play. Not to mention the lots of side activities and quests that you can engage in, almost all of which are guaranteed to be a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, let's move on to what I think is the most fun part of Spider-Man Miles Morales: the gameplay. As you'd expect, this being a successor to 2018 Spider-Man, gameplay is quite similar to that. And that is just no problem at all. In fact, I really enjoyed not having to relearn most of everything, and jumping into the action was like riding a badass, web-swinging, point-launching, free-falling, ass-kicking bike. As soon as I got my hands on the controls, it was...
Yeah, I'm the new Spider-Man! Check it out! Whoa!
So yeah, the controls are mostly the same as the previous game. However, on the new console, the experience is greatly enhanced via the DualSense controller. Anyway, combat is also quite similar to Marvel's Spider-Man, with the addition of the Venom and invisibility powers that Miles possesses, which really help mix up the gameplay enough not to make it feel just simply copied and pasted, giving it its own flavor, its own kind of rhythm, at the same time keeping us reminded that this is still a Spider-Man who has most likely learned his moves from the OG. The game also features a skill tree very similar to the 2018 game, as well as unlockable suits, power-ups, and gadget upgrades. The most fun I've had, though, wasn't during combat. I mean, this can't come as a surprise, but the most fun thing in this game is web swinging. Web swinging is how you get around the city, and it is just f***ing awesome, because every time I had to go somewhere, I had to web swing, and every time I had to web swing, I was like...
And for like 2 days, I've been the one and only Spider-Man.
It's very obvious that the developers really put a lot of work into making web swinging feel as quote-unquote authentic as possible in Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, don't get me wrong, the swinging in 2018 Spider-Man was really awesome, but in this game, it is near perfect. It's amazing, and if you think that I'm talking nonsense, well...
I missed the part where that's my problem.
No, seriously, I mean, the movement during the swings and the transitions, the air tricks that you do with Miles, how you can combine them, and how you go from a trick to a swing, to a trick, to a web zip, to a point launch, to air trick, to swing again, it all just feels more fluid, more natural, more tied together, you know? Yeah. It all just fits together. And of course, the way Miles moves also got a lot of attention. He is not yet the graceful and infinitely experienced Spider-Man that we saw in Peter Parker. He is still learning the ropes, making a few mistakes, losing his nerve a couple of times, and all of this can be seen in the way he moves and web swings, and I mean, it's just
awesome.
Now I want to talk about the things, or well, really just one thing that bothered me in this game, and that is that it froze a few times. A couple of times the game just froze in place and nothing happened, and the sounds were still going on around me, but everything else was just standing still, and the game was unresponsive, no controls, no nothing. And ultimately this resulted in me having to restart the game, which was frustrating, sure, but it wasn't anything to go all about. I can honestly say that this game is a barrel of fun, whether I was playing through the story, doing some side objectives, or just swinging through the city, enjoying the gorgeous views and scenery that it has to offer. I was immersed in it 100% from start right to the finish. As I've already said, Miles Morales is notably shorter than its predecessor. However, this does not mean that you will get much less out of it. Similarly to the 2018 game, you can do lots of side activities, whether it's just stopping random crimes occurring throughout the city, or hunting down collectibles, or even just doing the challenges that Peter's left behind for you to hone your Spider-Manning skills. I think that overall, it's great fun. Now, with all that said, as you know, being a weekend gamer, I measure playtime in weekends, so as the game is for me now, having finished the main story and most of the side activities, it took me 2 weekends. Plus, I have to admit, I cheated a couple of times and snuck in a few hours in the old gaming den, some weekdays as well, but I just couldn't keep away. Now, before giving it my final score, I must confess, Spider-Man is my favorite childhood superhero, so there is a little bias here, but I'm going to do my best to stay neutral when giving it my final verdict. That being said, I felt like my normal scale of 1 to 5 wouldn't suffice for Spider-Man Miles Morales, as I would really not like seeing such a low number for a truly awesome Spider-Man game. So, on a new and improved scale of 1 to 10, I rate Spider-Man Miles Morales at 9. Now, do I think that this new Spider-Man and the new game are better than the originals? No. But I think they're almost on par, which is saying a lot since the OG Spider-Man and the 2018 game set the bar almost impossibly high, and even coming close to them.
That is awesome, dude!
I will absolutely be returning to this gem. Just go swing around town, kick a few bad guys' asses, enjoy the cityscape and the views from atop some of Manhattan's most iconic skyscrapers, and enjoy which is now another game that makes you truly feel like Spider-Man. The smaller one. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you've enjoyed this review, thwip, swing and zip to the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this, and ring that bell button if you like to be notified when I post it. I'm Zoltan the Gamerman, and these have been my honest thoughts on Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5. Take care, be well, and as always, keep on gaming.